Okay, welcome back to Datto's MSP Tech Day. I'm Jeff Farris, President CEO of CloudRadial, and we're here to take a deep dive in this section on CloudRadial's service catalog. So we've got a lot of good things to talk about. Again, this is part of a multi-part webinar series that we're doing for MSP Tech Data. If you want to catch this later, feel free to join us on YouTube, where all this content will be available as well. So want to go now dive into the CloudRadial service catalog. We're going to talk about the ways that we bring all this together. There's Ricky, our Director of Development. So he's back with his coffee, so we like that.
I like that.
So to this section, we want to talk about the service catalog and ticketing. And we want to spend a little bit of time about how this fits into CloudRadial's integrated, pane of glass approach. And service, sales catalog, problem catalog really is one of those things that brings all the parties together at the table. And what you'll find with CloudRadial's approach is that we are going to focus, a lot of people probably start with us thinking that we're a ticketing portal, which we do extremely well. But what we want to do is grow that whole relationship from ticketing into a much broader range of interaction. We want to take the idea of ticketing that you do on a daily basis with clients and turn that into a process that enables a much more comprehensive, again, a much more integrated single pane of glass approach. So in the way we work with ticketing, again, it's just a small part of the features that we provide to bring everybody together. But what we're going to do with what's different about our service approach is right off the bat, we're going to try to separate out the service catalog from the support catalog. And by that, we want your clients thinking about you in two different ways. One, that you're there to solve problems, which is the way that they typically think about you. Is probably the way they thought about their last MSP, or they thought about their last repair. But we also want them to think about you as a solutions provider. We also want them to understand that you can do more than that you can not only help them with new hardware or software or setting new users up, but you're also there to help with other opportunities as well, whether that be training, voice over IP, or any other services that you want to explore with those clients. We want to make sure that your clients knows what you do before you even sit down to talk to them at the QBR or at the regular meeting. So again, we want to separate the service catalog and the support catalog. We want clients thinking about you in those two different ways, and we're going to use that to facilitate not only a better service experience, but a better sales experience as well. And again, we're to turn clients into consumers as opposed to people you sell to. All of this from a service standpoint, and actually from a sales standpoint as well, is to basically get through a faster time to resolution. And by that, what we want to do is we want to separate out the concepts of mean time to ticket versus mean time to resolution. And every client understands what mean time to ticket is because it's how fast they can recall your support email address or how fast they can call you on the phone. So typically their time to ticket can be extremely speedy. But we also know that when the information comes in as incomplete or missing, then all of a sudden that mean time to ticket, which is very short, turns into a very long time to resolve because of all the back and forth and additional data collection that occurs. So part of what you can do with CloudRadial is basically reset expectations around faster resolution by using the catalog and using the forms that we provide, so that basically the ticket's coming complete. Takes maybe a 30 seconds longer to complete a ticket, but then it can get resolved potentially hours faster because all the information comes in to complete. The other piece that comes in is it can be fully triaged. So again, if we've got all the right information, we've asked all the right questions, it can be routed to the right by type, subtype item inside the PSA, so that basically items can be routed to the right engineer to resolve that issue. Because again, if the ticket comes in saying they're requiring help, you don't know the subject, you don't know who best can resolve it. Again, the more accurate that information comes in, the more it's already pre-triaged, the better it works. We want to facilitate that through also through what we call checklists and scripts. So again, you can add checklists and scripts to the tickets so that they will have the ability to, again, as that ticket comes in, you'll have a list of items for the technicians. And auto task, it comes in exactly as a checklist. And other PSAs, it comes in as appropriate for them. And the nice part is that comes in ready to go, ready for you to walk through. So again, a good CloudRadial implementation, especially on the ticketing side, is a combination of efficiencies for the client, but a lot of efficiencies and standard operations for the service staff as well. And again, everything is customizable, including the workflow piece. So again, not only can you customize the forms and make sure that they get set to the right PSA settings and ask the right questions, but you can also make sure that the workflow is handled internally at the client. So if a user submits a request for a new laptop, that gets approved by the manager before you get it to fulfill. And vice versa, if there's something you need to implement on their side, like a network change on a Friday evening, that there's an easy way to get a workflow and approval in CloudRadial before it hits your PS as well. So you're going to find that the service approach that we use in CloudRadial is extremely flexible, and again is designed to facilitate an evolving relationship beyond just the ticketing that you do today into something much bigger and much more robust. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ricky to do a deep dive on Service Catalog.
Sure, thank you so much, Jeff. Let me do my usual screen sharing abilities here. All right. Perfect. All right, so yeah, so I'm obviously very focused on the display of how this works from a demo perspective. And what's interesting is that Jeff and I, we have the same ultimate goals whenever we show anything, but especially when it comes to ticketing. And I want to show you guys, I think it makes a lot more sense if you haven't seen it before, what that looks like from a client experience. And there's a couple of different ways to tackle this. And I actually think that the ticketing experience starts even before they know what the portal looks like. So what I'm sharing right now is an example of our demo tenant, right? This is the one that we usually run a lot of our calls on whenever we have any demo calls with anybody. And this one's homepage is set to be very conducive to ticketing, which I think is important, because sometimes whenever you introduce a portal, there's a lot of logistics there of like, what do they expect coming from the portal? And one of the main things that a lot of our partners come to, they come to kind of hook them on something better, right? They might want something a little bit more feature rich, or just something that offers just a more complete experience. And this thing certainly does that. So in this case, easy peasy, right? We're going straight to that report a problem request service, and we'll look at both of those in a minute. Same thing with ticket updates. But if you first start with your tenant, and if anyone watches this and they're trialing it, you're going to start off with something more like this, where it's like a smaller view, or maybe even better yet, it'll actually have something like this, where it'll be the applications homepage. And there's something to consider, again, generally speaking, when you first approach the portal, as to what will hook your clients. And we actually do recommend, I think we make a point to say, this is not just a ticketing portal, but ticketing is one of the easiest hooks to get them in there, because that's usually what is expected. Now, when they actually get in there, that's where I think we're going to subvert expectations just a little bit, right? So starting off with your typical ticketing, when you think of the problem reports, we certainly have that. So whether it's accessing it based off of the homepage you have set, or even from the left-hand navigation menu, right? These both link report a problem to the same thing. And just as a quick aside, all these are customizable. So if you're worried that it is submit a ticket in your world, you can totally change that too. But the behavior is, whenever they first click on it, they're going to get taken to, as Jeff was mentioning, a pre-filled catalog of available options, right? And this is ultimately up to you to decide what they have available to them. Now, we start you off with a bunch of tickets when we first start you out, because nobody likes to start off with blank. And we worked with a lot of MSPs very closely to kind of figure out the most universal, lowest common denominator that covers all the bases for most people, right? So anything from your computer issues to printer and software, or even just a general not listed here. And the idea is fairly simple. I mean, if you're looking at this for the first time, you're probably wondering why I'm not just clicking on something, right? And there you go, there's stuff. So basically from here, I'd be able to select my ticket. This is the end user experience. I'm having warning messages, my computer's restarting, or maybe it's a printer problem instead. I'm having problems with printing, okay. So it gives them the category, gives them the ticket. Once they click on the ticket, the questions pop up, and this is also fully customizable. So this is your opportunity to go through and try to make this as as descriptive or non-descriptive, depending on the issue, as possible, right? So using this option, giving them a nice lecture on why, in this case, we wrote a lot of stuff, on why they should be using this, or maybe if they should be referencing something beforehand before putting it in, and then getting that relevant information. So undoubtedly, one of the challenges of a ticketing portal that a lot of people feel the pain of, MSP-wise, is that they worry about giving it to their clients, knowing that their clients are going to have a longer mean time to ticket. And remember, that's something that is a challenge everywhere. That is okay, right? Because ultimately, getting 4 questions out of the way before the user submits a ticket instead of just saying my printer doesn't work, right, may save them literally hours or more in time. So it's kind of a necessary evil to kind of do this, right? Sometimes the forms are not even that bad. Like, you know, I'm not listed here, and something simple like this might be a 2-question issue, right? You can have something as simple as this go through, but we really insist from a methodology perspective to try to be descriptive with your services, try to glean as much information as possible, because again, you know that the real metric of success isn't the response time, it's the resolution. That's the one that they ultimately care about, that affects their day-to-day. So you're seeing me click through this, and I think for the most part, it's fairly self-explanatory, right? There's a lot of questions here. I can write my answers, I can expand the fields, I can tick off the boxes. On the back end, I think that's more of what the MSPs want to see how this works. So on the front end, it's a very simple experience for the problem tickets. They click, they submit the answer, and there you go. On the back end, what does that look like? Well, you can actually build this basically from scratch. So everything from building your own drop-down or adding to an existing one in this case, writing your own subject, which is the ticket itself, and appending descriptions to try to help the client figure out what the use case is for submitting this ticket. As well, we've got plenty of options for things like file upload or signatures or pinning it if it's a common issue, and then building the questions the way you want, right? So CloudRadial is a really interesting tool because it's not something that I would classify as complex, but I wouldn't say it's quick either, right? If you've got a giant catalog of custom tickets, chances are we've got every single bit that you need to build it in here. It just kind of depends on how you want to tackle this. But this thing is very, very flexible. So obviously, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through every sub option. Very much what you see is what you get, right? Whether it's a text-based question you want to ask, or a date, or maybe a multi-choice. For the most part, you would click your option, you'd label it, you'd give your choices. I think the thing that makes this interesting is that you can keep it to a simple question saying, I have a problem, this is my problem, here's the question to answer, and that's it. Or if you break it down, you can do things like having conditional statements, right? You can start to make this a little bit more user-friendly, because if you've got really big forms and maybe you don't need to ask half those questions unless other questions are asked first, you can do that, right? Hide this one until this one equals this. So that way you build a nice logic in there to try to simplify it as much as possible. Custom fields, capturing things in custom fields, and the JSON field IDs are more advanced use cases because, again, at its simplest, we're asking questions and we're getting answers for them. Okay. Now, at its more complex, we're going through and we're actually triggering automations off this, and there's anything in between. So these are kind of related to those types of things. So once you build your questions within your tickets to be whatever you like, the other things you can do with them are on a question-by-question basis, such as adding a confirmation message. Now, people ask me all the time, and they go like, what is the most useful thing for confirmation messages other than like, hey, ticket submitted? I have a lot of partners nowadays that are getting really smart about using their existing knowledge base to try to cut down and eliminate tickets. And there's always the question of, how does that all come together? Well, I know it's not the point of this webinar, but CloudRadial has a built-in knowledge base. And even if you have something else, something that I'm seeing more and more partners do nowadays is they'll put relevant information on how to resolve that specific issue. You know what they're going to be asking. I mean, you're building the ticket for it. So if this was a printer issue, you might put an article helping them figure out that printer issue in the confirmation message. So after they hit submit, the confirmation message pops up with the hint or with the article. Why after? Why wouldn't you do that before? Because that way it helps you figure out if that article has helped, right? It helps you track the issues that they put in so that you can still track the metrics of who's having that problem, but you can see if by the time you got to it, it helped or not. So some interesting use cases for confirmation. Of course, groups is kind of what you would be thinking of from a user group perspective, right? CloudRadial works on multiple levels. It's not always just about showing it to everyone. You might want administrator-only tickets. You might want a basic ticket for everyone, or maybe something in between. You might want to start building custom flows for HR people or for your limited admins. You can define all that as well. The most important thing, I think, besides questions, the only two that were really mandatory are questions and routing, and that's what we'll cover now is the routing part. So after you ask what you want to ask, these two are a little bit of extra, but routing is really where you're going to nail the organizational flow. So the 3 things that you're going to need, well, at least for this PSA, I believe we're connected here to a main one, is you're going to get the option to kind of triage it whatever way you want to. So from the board and the queues you select to the status and the priority, and then you can see that I toggled this on. You can get as nitty gritty as doing the type and the subtype and the item and the source and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to, some partners don't utilize every single field, but if you're trying to get this to be just perfect, it comes in exactly where you want to and you know exactly where to route it, you certainly can. What Jeff was mentioning earlier is another very popular use case in CloudRadial, is the ability to kind of get tickets pre-approved before they ever reach you, whether that's from an approval perspective or even change management. So this company approval required is very commonly used in CloudRadial, in that you can elect to have this ticket require an approver, and you can even have it be a specific approver or any admin within that system, which kind of is very nice to get those questions out of the way, so you're not having to hunt that down. You can wait for the workflow to come through before it ever hits your system, or if it gets shut down, you logged it, but it never really bothered you guys, which is nice. After that, there's a ton of email notifications, Teams, webhooks, I'm sorry, not Teams, but webhooks in general. And these can be used in very clever ways as well. So anything from sending an additional email, like almost like a CC to maybe another support ad. We've seen this used in clever ways with maybe even third-party things that are not necessarily related to the PSA. The webhooks, of course, Teams and Slack are very common for notification purposes. And then the flow and the JSON ones, like I mentioned earlier, are for those partners that are really into automation. So at its simplest, right, this ticket can be used to say, please help, off to the PSA to a triage board, and that's it, right? At its more complex, what I've seen people do with this live in CloudRadial is, hey, I want to provision a Microsoft license, hey, this, custom IDs, this kicks off a Flow webhook to go provision that license, the JSON webhook gets picked up by something like a Zapier or something and kicks off some flows. I mean, it is nuts how much stuff you can do if you just give people a connection. But remember, as I demo all this, you do not have to use any of this. As long as you give it a place to go and some questions, you're good to go. There's a separate section for company settings, because a lot of times what will happen is clients may want things like their own webhook or their own notification. So you can have that set as well on the ticket by ticket basis. So there's a lot of power in where you route it. And then as Jeff was saying, another option too is the checklist. So with the checklist function, you can have the tasks required to solve that ticket come in. And that's also part of the mean time to resolution for those tickets, because if you can offer a similar resolution for that ticket, right, some general instructions, the idea is that all of a sudden you're starting to not just organize your tickets the way that your clients do them, but you're organizing the tickets the way that the technicians solve them. So you're ultimately trying to get on your end the most experienced person and the least experienced person balanced. They follow the same instructions, therefore you can scale it whatever way you want to. So a lot of interesting use cases for checklists. And then script, lastly, is another interesting function. So a lot of times tickets can be resolved using simple PowerShell scripts, and something that a lot of our geekier friends can figure out some kind of crazy flows to build PowerShell scripts based off of variables that they can pull from CloudRadial, because we already know their emails and their usernames and who they are, right? So this thing is not going to generate and run PowerShell scripts for you. It is going to attach the PowerShell script to the ticket as it comes in. So if you want to have something cut off at the pass, right, you want to be able to go, oh, give me a script with this name, and I can just run that. Again, a junior technician can now have the same crazy PowerScript capabilities as your most senior guy. It just generates it for them. So depending on how much effort you want to put in these questions and these tickets can be super, super powerful, but at the very minimum, it's going to be very efficient. And the methodology, again, we kind of bounce back and forth between the client side and the tech side. That was definitely tech side. Remember, the client will not see any of that. The client gets a very clean experience of this. And you can see that it's also very no nonsense. I mean, they come here, they're on their homepage, they go there, I got a problem, click, they fill the problem, they're on their way. What Jeff was saying, and I think personally I believe this too, the more interesting thing that CloudRadial does is that service catalog kind of split apart, because with the tickets, we want them to get in and out and have no problem submitting that ticket. With the service request, it's a different mindset. So again, I'm talking about this button right here, or maybe even this little shopping cart icon, same place. It takes them to something that looks like this. Now this is much more visually appealing. It's much more shopping-like, right? So it's almost like a little Amazon cart. And this is for a couple of different reasons. So this thing is to split apart your problems from your service requests, which even from a mentality perspective starts to change the dynamic of what has typically been a pain portal. And I'm sure many of you guys have experienced this with ticketing portals. If there is a ticketing portal, a lot of times it has a negative connotation, because the problem is that you go there when things go wrong, right? And it's even on a subconscious level, that is just it ends up being painful, and it's easier to submit a ticket. And I don't have to log in to go do something that maybe might work, maybe might not. This starts to split apart the request that, hey, if they have a problem, it's quick, easy, let's get it done. If they want to look for stuff, right? Maybe they want to order a laptop, maybe they want to onboard a user. It's kind of a nicer thing. But guess what? From setting this up, it's not that difficult. I mean, it's the same ticket flow. So you can route this to a different maybe sales board, another triage area. So you have the power to kind of split that apart, but the client gets a radically different experience altogether. Another huge benefit that a lot of people use this for today is to showcase your service catalog. That I think I can speak pretty clearly that everyone has this problem. Once the client gets in the door, it's really hard to keep them up to date on what you do and don't offer them, right? So in this demo account, we have all kinds of things on here, right? So anything from your order a laptop, right, where you could load in your configuration of your services, to things like setting up your OneDrive, all the way down to connecting workstations or change management things, right? Or onboarding and offboarding users, also super popular for this area. And that kind of stuff is invaluable, because all of a sudden you're changing the dynamic of the portal to be your all-in-one, one-stop shop. And there's a ton of stuff in CloudRadial, but this is a really big part of the conversation that starts to get that mentality towards, oh, my MSP, my IT provider can do more things. I can always see that. I can have that at my fingertips. So it gives a lot of power to the end users. Between the two, right? So you got your report a problem request service. And again, if I were to go create this, you'll see that it is almost down to the exact same stuff, exactly the same. You can do stuff like putting a button text on there and then changing the icon and the color and whatnot, which is interesting, but for the most part, nothing too different from the other one. Another thing that we thought about a lot is we don't ever want to hinge the success of your portal based off of ticketing, because ticketing is extremely important, but it shouldn't be the only thing, right? Especially with CloudRadial, we're so focused on getting this to be a whole experience for client experience, for an account manager, for the end user to go through, that we don't want to limit ourselves to just being successful based off if someone put a ticket in from the portal. And there's also an aspect of realism where it's kind of old dog, new tricks. If you've got an old client that you're now rolling out a portal, it's going to be hard to get them to submit tickets no matter how seamless the experience is. And another thing that we thought about with this is how we even display the support tickets, right? So it's a no-brainer to want to be able to display the support tickets and show the history of that back and forth. But I think something that we do is, regardless of whether it was submitted from the portal or via an alternative source, if it's in the PSA via the support tickets area, we can pull it through, right? So that means that all of a sudden you're not limited to just those that use the portal to get the benefit of this. The portal now has multiple aspects of use for your clients. So you can see that I've got a bunch of tickets open here. And the rationale here is that if I'm an administrator in the system, I'm able to see all of the tickets open for the entire organization. So I have a singular point of access for everything. If I'm an end user, I can also see I can only see my own tickets as an end user, and obviously I am an administrator. So as I look back and forth, this is syncing back and forth with the PSA. So I click on any one of these tickets and what's going on. All of a sudden I can see a history in a very friendly, easy to read format, right? It's basically an iPhone chat log. There's really not craziness of history. And you can enable the client to close the ticket and cancel it, or disable that function as well. So having the power to see this back and forth is really powerful. As far as that change management and that approval workflow, we've got things that come from our side of things. If you do trigger one of those, approval required, you can see that, for example, this one right here, this one is not like the other ones. It actually has a status saying waiting on internal approval. So they'll be able to see that in their open tickets. They'll be able to see that in their waiting tickets. And this is something that we actually send out a branded email on your behalf from the portal saying, hey, you've got a ticket to approve, and they can see that when they first hit the home page. So having that in all-in-one view, very powerful for the clients and the end users alike. Now, there is a lot of other stuff to be discussed on ticketing, but I think for the most part, that's a pretty good summarization. I think the only other thing that I'd like to impart is showing the client maybe even some actions on there, and not necessarily the purpose of this webinar, but one of the things that we can do is a dashboarding capability, and having that ability to dashboard out a lot of different data points. A lot of it comes from our native CloudRadial agent, but even showing the clients themselves a view of how many tickets are answered and who's submitting them and how all that's going is really cool, and that's built directly in here. So you can still keep the conversation going, and not just the day-to-day, but you can show them progress of maybe who's putting in tickets, how fast are we resolving them, all that kind of stuff. Whether it comes from us directly via the API or even other areas that you want to bring in. So in the COVID one, we're showing you, like, for example, you can bring in your Power BIs and Bright Gauges and all that kind of stuff. It kind of helps you wrap up the ticketing experience into one complete thing. So it's not just, again, about submitting tickets from the portal back and forth or not. It's about showcasing the client that yes, they can use this. Yes, it works very well. Yes, it has the back and forth ticket update, but also give me that holistic view, and that kind of fits into the greater client experience. So that's kind of my.
Now, we're down to a couple of minutes. I want to show a couple of really fast things. One is FastPath.
Sure.
So if you search for OneDrive, say your client's having trouble with OneDrive, and you type in OneDrive up there, or the client does, what we're going to do is route them back to the right resources, whether that's request a service, ordering new things, knowledge base articles. We can even pull in articles from support.microsoft or support.gmail. So again, you have a lot of ability to wrap all the complexity of CloudRadial up into a single keyword search. So that's new. That came out just a couple of months ago, and that's proven to be a real time saver for clients and even for MSPs looking for things. Now, one other thing I want to show, because this is one of those things that came back because the tickets come in so triaged so well. What often happens is partners' triage desk needs to be able, they want to use those forms to submit tickets on the client's behalf. And so go to partner clients, go to users, click on a particular user, three-dot menu, and say report a problem. So what this will do is open up another window as that user ready to go at the triage desk. So it's really powerful when somebody calls in and they're saying, look, I've got a problem with my email. You know there's a form for it, but you don't want to go to ConnectWise and code, or Autotask and code it all by hand. So you can just use CloudRadial to submit the ticket on the client's behalf, and it comes in already pre-triaged, all ready to go, and you can train anybody on the front desk to be able to do this and basically submit tickets like a pro back to the rest of the support team. So another powerful feature that, again, because we have all the data here, we have all the capability here, it just makes it easy to work from not only the client perspective, but from the MSP perspective as well. So